I'll recognize Mr. Murphy for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for coming today. Interesting discussion. Ethics is not an easy job. I did it in many committees in medicine over the last 30 years. It's always hard to judge people when there's a mirror in front of your face all the time. And so I appreciate your service. I would like to ask Mr. Esmawi, and I'm not ganging up on you. I'm not doing that. I'm trying. I know this is not easy. I'm not pretending it's easy. But, you know, there were a couple incidents that you've had with alcohol and some other things. Some you're not your fault, some your fault. I'm just interested, you know, when someone is relieved of pay and goes to get things straight away, what process did you have to go through to earn the trust of your coworkers again?
Well, I think the most important aspect of the program was a random urinalysis program. So it meant, you may or may not know that it turns out that they can now detect the alcohol metabolites as far back as almost 4 days. And so I was subject to that, continue to actually be subject to that. And I'm very proud to report that I've always had negative results in that regard. It also tests, by the way, for other drugs, but thankfully that's not an issue.
You mentioned syncope as being related to this. If you had a separate work, I won't do a HIPAA violation here, but if you, because that's, you know, if you're alcohol, if you're syncope, you're out. It's not a short little event.
So it's, yes, as you clearly understand, I've had a number of episodes related to syncope. I've been hospitalized on 2 occasions, most recently here at GW last month. I am working through various specialists and addressing that separately from my alcoholism.
Are you allowed to drive?
I don't drive.
Okay. All right. I'll just leave that as it is. I want to get a little bit into how you guys work, what this is all about. Fortunately, I've not had to my knowledge, any ethical complaints. But can you guys point to where you get most of your tips from? Yeah, sure, you can start.
Sure. The Office of Congressional Ethics has, so one of the things that's, just very quickly.
Is there like a 1-800 report on your congressman line?
It is, we are the public facing entity. And so we do receive a tremendous amount of unactionable material. It's one of the reasons why we don't notify people, the subject of an incoming submission, because so many times the submission itself is just irrelevant to the work that we do and clearly on its face, not a violation. And so it has always been our belief that bothering members of
Congress... Are they anonymous?
Sometimes they're anonymous, often they're not. Mostly they're not.
What do y'all do in the instance where you have the suspicion that is a political attack? Is there a special remediation? Is there special discernment? Let me just ask Mr. Barnes on how that gets handled.
We get those all the time, political attacks. And we one of the advantages of having former members serving on this.
So how do you tell the difference between a political attack?
We can spot that pretty easily.
Okay. But what do you do? How do you act on that?
Well, we take that very much into account. That doesn't mean the violation didn't occur. So there might be a look. There would be on any accusation. There's going to be a look to see if there's any kinds of substance at all to it. But we won't even begin a preliminary investigation without a pretty thorough analysis that indicates that something might have happened.
Who makes that decision as to whether to proceed forward?
Well, our staff of investigators, and you know, these are all former.
Do you all sit on and vote on it on a committee to proceed?
Former investigators. We've got a former detective who's sitting behind me here, who works for us. We've got, you know, a former an attorney for the Congress. We've got.
All right. Well, you got groups.
How do
you make the decision? How do you make the decision?
They go through these 50,000 things initially before they don't bring something to the board that's obviously frivolous. We got a lot of complaints about President Obama or about President Trump. You know, they have nothing to do with us.
All right. Who makes the final decision as to whether you proceed with an allegation or something with a member of Congress?
The board.
The board.
Only the board.
Okay, and is that by simple majority vote, or what is that
Well,
done?
to start the investigation, it takes two members, one Democrat, one Republican. You can't open an investigation without that. Now, usually, and almost all the stuff we do as the board ends up being unanimous. As I said, we have a great spirit of collegiality and respect, mutual respect. Almost everything, way over 80% of everything we've ever done in my tenure has been unanimous.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Griffith for 5 minutes.
Pushing the old button, sorry. Mr. Ash Maui, you just answered a question that raised alarm bells in my mind. You don't drive. You were asked, the question is, was your license and he didn't say it this way, but was it suspended? And your response was that you don't drive. As a former criminal defense attorney, let me get there, because I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to get the facts. That would indicate to me multiple driving under the influence charges. So can you just explain that to me? Have you had more than one? We've heard about the one driving under the influence. Have you had more than one driving under the influence charge?
I've had no other instances.
So you're not legally prohibited from driving, but you have chosen not to because of where you live and because of circumstances related to your alcoholism.
And because of the syncope that Congressman
Murphy talked about. Sure.
Also. I have a family. I don't want to put them at risk. God forbid I'm behind the wheel and I pass out. That would do tremendous harm to anyone in the car, let alone.
As long as it's not court-related,
No,
I care, but I don't, it's not part of my questioning today. Mr. Vinovich, you all looked at the transgressions, the one transgression during the fight incident using the official email or stationery or whatever, and you looked into the alcohol situation, and you all decided that it was worth not pursuing any further. I'm correct in restating that, am I not?
Sure, yes.
Okay. So then that raises the issue of congressmen. Now, I've always feared substance abuse, so I don't use substances, alcohol or anything else, except caffeine. Love my caffeine. That being said, would it be appropriate then to excuse some inappropriate use of congressional stationery or assets, or doing something that maybe you didn't realize was a breach, as Mr. Ashwami said at the beginning in his opening? He didn't realize that doing that was a breach of the ethics, but probably is. Would you take that into consideration for a member who has significant substance abuse issues? And I'm thinking of a particular member who's since gotten himself cleaned up, but his congressional career is at least gone for the time being. But does that come into play as to whether or not you would refer to the Ethics Committee? Because you gave Mr. Ashmawi a pass. Why wouldn't you give a member of Congress a pass?
I'll say a couple things about that. So the chairman introduced, again, this was.
I'm just asking, why wouldn't that require you, if you're playing fair, wouldn't that require you to give a member of Congress a pass if there was a clear issue related to alcoholism or other substance abuse?
Yeah, but I don't think the email and the alcoholism are related, but I'll answer it this way. Do we, if we're looking at a complaint, do we sometimes choose not to refer because we regard something as a de minimis violation? The answer to that is yes.
Okay. Now, let me go to another situation here that I thought was interesting in the confidentiality issues. It says, if the board, I'm looking at the confidential disclosure stuff off of y'all's website, if the board recommends dismissal and the committee also votes to dismiss the matter, the report does not have to be made public. Well, shouldn't that be the decision of the accused? If it's dismissed and not moving forward, shouldn't that be the decision, as opposed to does not have to be, shouldn't that be the decision of the accused whether it's released to the public?
Well, it's just, I mean, that's just, the rules speak to what we do. I suppose if the subject
But
receives.
you shouldn't say it should not be released. I mean, I would think it should say it should not be released unless released by the accused, because it says it may not have to be. Well, it shouldn't be, because you've got people's careers on the line here and people who've worked hard to have their reputation in the community. It sounds like to me if it's not founded, it shouldn't be released. Let's go to confidentiality further. In 2015, Politico magazine wrote a story about how the OCE leaked a confidential report to the Washington Post and Politico. Politico magazine wrote that they leaked the report because the Ethics Committee told them to cease the investigation, refer the matter to the Ethics Committee instead, something that was within the Ethics Committee's power to do. Mr. Ashwami, what did your investigation show? Who was the leaker?
So that matter was independently investigated. It was determined that no one on staff was responsible for the release of that report. But however, as I mentioned,
Well, who released it?
I could
And
not,
why did Politico falsely accuse you all of releasing it?
I can't answer that either. I can simply say that there was no evidence that it was improperly.
Have you ever found anybody who released information that was confidential before it was supposed to be released?
Not by our office, no.
You've never investigated, or if you've never found, your investigations have never found a leaker? Because I'm telling you, many members of Congress believe that your office leaks information, like a sieve.
I can honestly tell you, sir, that we do not and never have.
So Politico was just plain wrong. Their sources were wrong.
I can tell you it was not our office.
Does OCE have subpoena power?
We do not.
Then why do you, it's my understanding from several sources that you all have told witnesses that you will have to subpoena them if they don't answer the questions.
We definitely have not done that because we have no authority to do that.
So if somebody has told me that, they're also in error.
What may have been told to them, which is accurate, is that if they do not cooperate with our review, a recommendation can be made to the Committee on Ethics that the Committee on Ethics subpoena them in the related matter. That is something.
So if I find witnesses who say that that has happened, you will take disciplinary action against the staffer? Yes or no?
Well, I don't think it's.
I didn't say
my
you terminate him, I'm saying disciplinary
I would
action.
I would bring it up to the board and we would investigate it, but I can.
Which
tell
you never find anything. I yield back.
The gentleman yields. As agreed upon by unanimous consent, I now recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Stahl, for the purposes of an opening/closing statement. Gentleman's recognized.
And hopefully 5 minutes of questionings on top of that. I appreciate your generosity, Chairman, and thank you for our witnesses for being here today. Jurisdiction over the Office of Congressional Ethics is split among House Administration Committee, the Ethics Committee, and the Rules Committee. However, after nearly 2 decades of existence, the Office of Congressional Ethics has never testified before Congress. I'm glad to see that that's ended today. The Committee on House Administration continues our aggressive oversight agenda. I think the American people deserve to have confidence that Congress is accountable and that congressional entities are accountable to the American people. And that's why the Ethics Committee's work is so critical. The Office of Congressional Ethics was formed as a separate office to review the conduct of members and staff in a nonpartisan and independent manner. OCE is supposed to uphold the rules and ethics of the House, and there's evidence that this has not always been the case. Even today, OCE leadership, I think, continues to avoid accountability. As we do with each invited witness, we offered OCE Staff Director and Chief Counsel, Mr. M. Ashmawi, the opportunity to share his views of OCE's operations and his work here. In both committee rules and House rules require each invited witness to provide written testimony. Mr. Ashmawi declined to provide his own written testimony to the committee, but after staff reminded him of our rules and offered him another opportunity to provide testimony, he co-signed his name at the 11th hour onto the previously submitted testimony of the co-chairs who have very different roles at OCE. The purpose of our hearing today is to take steps to reestablish trust in the Office of Congressional Ethics, which has become politicized over the last 15 years. I think it's important to know that the OCE has spent $23 million since its creation and has an annual budget of $1.7 million. So I think it's important that we're ensuring taxpayers are getting $23 million worth of value for their $23 million investment. If not, we should identify what reforms are necessary to ensure OCE fulfills its purpose and is functioning in a nonpartisan and independent manner. With the chair's grace, I'll move on directly to my questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ashwami, if I can, I'm looking at a report from Jeffrey Harris to the Board of Congressional Ethics titled Investigating an Incident in the Aftermath Involving Chief Counsel Omar Ashmawi occurring on February 14, 2015 in Milford, Pennsylvania. We've discussed this a little bit before. Mr. Vinovich and Mr. Barnes, did you receive copies of this report as well? Yes. And Mr. Ashmawi, you did as well, correct?
I've seen a copy, yes.
In the February 2015, you were involved in the bar brawl in Pennsylvania that resulted in a lawsuit that was settled out of court, correct?
Not exactly.
So was there a lawsuit that was settled?
There was an assault that occurred in a bar. I'm sorry, Congressman, you missed my previous answer.
No, I was actually privy to it. I was able to watch while not being physically present in the room. But was there a lawsuit associated with that was settled out of court? I understand the conversation where the incident, and you referenced yourself as a victim. I'm just curious if there was a lawsuit that was settled out of court.
There was a lawsuit in which I, the town, and the then chief of police was a party. Ultimately, it was settled.
Did you personally have to pay restitution or damages as part of that settlement?
The agreement, for what it's worth, Congressman, is confidential. I'm not permitted to give the details of it.
Okay, so no answer related to that. But you did use your official email to correspond with Pennsylvania law enforcement and prosecutors, correct, as previously noted?
And other individuals, yes.
And so as we look at that, independent counsel found your actions were improper. Do you agree with the outside investigator that your emails could easily be viewed as intimidating?
I certainly would not have said that at the time. I don't take any issue with the ultimate conclusion by the investigator.
So not at the time, but looking back, you view that your emails could have been viewed as intimidating?
I see that he came to that conclusion and take no issue with it.
Okay. Mr. Vinovich, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Barnes, as well. Do you see using official resources in this manner could be viewed as intimidating, Mr. Vinovich?
I suppose, I don't know that, I conceivably, yes.
Okay. Mr. Barnes?
Sure. It could be seen to be that way.
Okay. Mr. Ashmawi, in one of the emails you sent to the Pennsylvania Victim Witness Coordinator, you wrote that, quote, there are a growing number of individuals in the Washington, D.C. community who've taken an interest in the matter, end quote. Who in D.C. Are you referring to in that statement?
At the time, this issue was the topic of frequent conversation with the then co-chairs of the OCE, who were checking in periodically, both with regard to my health and the status of the investigation.
So they were interested because they were concerned both about your health but also about the investigation?
Yes.
And were they interested in the investigation because these actions were unbecoming of the top ethics official in Congress?
At the time that they were making inquiry, there was only the assault being investigated, and so, no, they were not.
Very good. Continuing, you and Staff Director and Chief Counsel, you are the Staff Director and Chief Counsel for the Office of Congressional Ethics, and were found to have abused your position. Would you have kept an employee at OCE who was accused of intimidation while using official resources?
Based on the same wording and ruling of Mr. Harris's report, I would be inclined to, if they had the same record that I had at the time, yes.
So you believe you should have been able to keep your job?
I'm very proud of the 14 years that I have served, and I have served both the office and this country honorably. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Okay. Mr. Vinovich and then Mr. Barnes. HRS 5, which Congress adopted earlier this year, required the board to affirmatively vote to appoint and approve compensation of OCE staff. Mr. Vinovich, did you vote to appoint Mr. Ashmawi?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes, the board was unanimous in deciding to reappoint Mr. Rush.
So it's a unanimous vote of the board?
Unanimous vote of 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions. I yield back.
Well, the gentleman yields back. Without objection, I'd like to enter into the record the article Politico that was referred to several times during the hearing entitled Congress Must Halt Its Own Brewing Ethics Fight. Without objection.
Wait, may I seek recognition?
Yes.
To insert, seek unanimous consent to insert a Washington Post article from 2015 regarding the alleged leak at the OCE as well.
Without objection. Well, again, I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. I think this is, it's been helpful to us. This is the first time that there has been an oversight hearing or any oversight of the Office of Congressional Ethics. And as I said, I think it's been very helpful for us regarding decisions this committee needs to make going forward. Members of the subcommittee may have some additional questions for you, and we ask that you please respond to those questions in writing. Without objection, each member will have 5 legislative days to insert additional material into the record or to revise and extend their remarks. If there is no further business, I thank the members for their participation. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.